For the message you're trying to give me, making me the last speaker 2 days in a row. But thank you, Jonathan. Good evening. Brigadier General Jeb, Minister Torres. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, IDC, for allowing me to participate in the World Summit on Counter-Terrorism. It is a true privilege to be invited to address this audience assembled here last night and again today. As I mentioned last night, I wanted to thank all of you for what you bring to the counterterrorism fight. It was wonderfully refreshing to hear thought-provoking dialogue and to be informed by the latest ideas of our field. Given the changing environment of security threats in the world today, it is very important to bring the cutting-edge thought leaders such as yourselves together to discuss the current climate and cooperation, changing tactics that are necessary to protect our respective interests and those of our international partners. Today, I would like to share some thoughts on what I learned from 2008 to 2014 while I was serving as a civilian law enforcement and counterinsurgency advisor to the U.S. Marine Corps Infantry and Special Operations Unit in Afghanistan and Iraq. I ended up doing 5 deployments. Nothing I will cover today is cutting edge or innovative. All warriors since the beginning of time have struggled with the emotion of controlling their hate towards their enemy, from Sun Tzu to Saladin to Wellington to Grant, West Point graduate. All had to suppress their emotion of hate in order to think clearly and make sound decisions. The importance of understanding your enemy is not a new concept, but is often easier said than done because hate is such a strong emotion. I believe that hating your enemy just clouds your judgment and hinders your ability to develop a clear strategy to defeat them. You need to understand their values and cultures of your enemy from their eyes, their view, not your own. You must endeavor to understand how they conclude that you are their enemy. This is not the same as why you conclude why they are your enemy. We are clouded by our biases, known and unknown, that come from the culture and value system in which we are exposed to all our lives. If you believe the tactics used by your enemy are crazy or just plain stupid, then you just don't understand their culture and values. Hating your enemy will further fog your ability to learn their culture and understand those values. Your understanding of the enemy value system and cultural norms must be so in-depth that their tactics need to make sense to you when looking through your enemy's eyes. When your enemy's tactics start to make sense, only then will you be able to predict your enemy's future moves, which will in turn allow you the ability to minimize, counter, or prevent them. Today, Daesh endeavors to inspire homegrown, disenchanted lone wolves to attack civilians, police, and military personnel across the globe. In general, these lone wolves are self-radicalized individuals with little to no training, no real understanding of the radical clerics they claim to follow. And this tactic by Daesh is a strong departure from the AQ strategy of vetting, training, and giving financial support to bad actors. At first glance, this appears to be a cowardly act, getting someone that does not even understand your cause to do your fighting for you. The tactics goes against our values and makes no sense to us. The U.S. intelligence community has struggled with this new terrorist model because it doesn't fit their view or their legal definition of a terrorist. Back in the 1700s, another insurgency was targeting, shooting opposing officers at the beginning of a skirmish. This too was considered to be cowardly and not suitable for our culture. The insurgency I'm referring to, of course, is the American Revolution. For years, when battles were fought in Europe, opposing officers were never targeted. The unwritten rule in those days was that officers were not to be targeted and when the first prisoners exchanged after a battle. So you can see where the American rebels or revolutionaries began targeting officers with snipers or sharpshooters. It was new and an unfamiliar tactic that caused great havoc and disruption, communication, by removing leadership from the battlefield. Why did the Americans commit this cowardly act when they had similar cultural values with their British cousins? 1700 Europe was controlled by aristocracy. In Europe, officers on both sides were considered to be part of the European aristocracy and often identified more with each other than the soldiers they led to battle. Americans did not have an aristocracy, and as a result, they felt no particular bond for their enemy officers. Now examine this tactic as an American insurgent, not as a British officer. Targeting enemy officer during battle to limit communication, remove leadership, makes perfect sense. During my 3 tours in Afghanistan that went from 2009 to 2014 in Helmand province, the enemy was the Taliban and the people that supported the Taliban. But what is the culture and values of the Taliban? Not an easy question. The Taliban culture and values are influenced by not only the Afghan people, Islam, Pakistan, and the traditions of the Pashtun tribes. I'm sure that some Taliban expert in the crowd could name another influence that I did not identify. My point is that you must expand your knowledge base to be able to understand and think like the enemy, and you cannot do it if you cannot contain your hate. As a lieutenant commander of detectives in the NYPD following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, I had more hate in my heart than understanding for anyone's culture or values besides my own. By 2009, I had served 1 tour in Iraq and was now in Afghanistan for the first time. As the saying goes, Americans learn their geography by where they go to war, and I was no different. But I quickly learned that I needed a better understanding of the values of the culture that molded my enemy. I read, perused, and argued about many books that you are familiar with having to do with Islam, Afghanistan, and the Pashtun people. I even read a psychologist's paper on the sexual practices of the Pashtun male. But I learned most by talking and meeting with the people of the region, having them explain to me what is important to them, what motivates them, and what guides their family values. This better understanding allowed me to advise U.S. Marines on 3 combat deployments in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. There is no one expert, no one source for any one of our enemies that you can identify today. You need to search out many sources on the topic as possible. You need to understand that even your expert source has some biases. Most important, you must come to grips with identifying your own biases. But to do it all successfully, you must eliminate the emotion of hate, or at least identify it as a weakness to move forward in understanding your enemy. Thank you for listening, and thank you for what you bring to the fight.
CT.